All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the very first Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accountability Committee. It is March 16th, 2022. I'll go ahead and read the preamble now. This meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by the California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16th, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and committee members while allowing for public participation. The public may address the committee members using exclusively remote public comment options. The committee may take action on any item listed in the agenda. To address the committee, the IDEA Committee meeting will be an exclusively virtual meeting. The IDEA Committee meeting agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbaneca.org at least 24 hours prior to a special meeting and at least 72 hours prior to a regular meeting. To view the meeting, please join the meeting with the Zoom information below. And the meeting participants are encouraged to submit public comments in writing in advance of the meeting. Aside from the commenting while in the Zoom meeting, the following email and text line will also be monitored during the meeting, and public comments received will be noted into the record during oral communications for an item. Email ipadilla@brisbaneca.org, text 628-219-2922, and join the Zoom meeting with a meeting ID 816-0979-9931, passcode 123456, and the call-in number 1-669-900-9128. If you need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact me, the city clerk, at 415-508-2113. Notification in advance of the meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting. So we're now calling the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. I will now do the roll call. Committee Member Horton.
Here.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Committee Member Kolhatkar.
Aye.
Committee Member Locke.
Aye.
And Committee Member Oseta.
Aye.
Thank you. So now we will do the approval of agenda. Can I get a first and a second to approve the agenda as it stands?
I'll first it.
Thank you. Can I get a
I'll
second?
second.
Thank you. I currently do not see any members of the public in this meeting, but is there any other members of the public wishing to make public comment on an item not on the agenda? And it looks like I have not received any text messages or email correspondences either. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the new business items.
Ingrid, before you do that, do you want them to vote on approving the agenda as posted?
Oh, let's do the roll call. Yes. So we have to do roll call vote, and so that will go in order. Committee Member Horton.
Aye.
Committee Member Kolhatkar.
Aye.
Committee Member Locke.
Aye.
Committee Member Oseta.
Aye.
Thank you. So with the new business item, city manager, committee staff leads, city department staff, and committee member introductions. Welcome, City Manager Holstein.
I'll start off. Welcome to everyone. We're really excited to have this committee up and running and to have you participate. This is something that I think the city staff has been very focused on and working on for some time. Again, I'm Clay Holstein, City Manager. I want to introduce you, and you've already met our City Clerk, Ingrid Padilla, but she's going to be your lead staff person and organizing the meetings for you and being your kind of main contact for this committee. She's going to be supported by Carolyn Chung. Caroline is our communications manager, and she will also play a lead role in terms of working with you. But I wanted to also tonight to introduce you to a number of other staff members. We look at the IDEA committee as really kind of being the think tank. And the city staff is here to help implement the things that you come up with. So you're going to have a lot of resources available to you. And we don't ever want you to feel like, oh, you've got to go do all that legwork. We're here to do that for you, depending on, what you end up doing. So I'm going to have the staff introduce themselves and what their roles with, and just so that you have a kind of a little bit of a sense of who's here. So I don't know, Sarah, you're the next on my count or my screen up there. So I'm going to go to you first.
Hi, so my name is Sarah Nejas, and I am a recreation coordinator. I am representing the Parks and Recreation Department tonight because our director is in the Park and Rec Commission meeting.
Great. Lisa?
Yes, good evening, IDEA Committee. I am Chief Lisa Macias, and I've been with the City of Brisbane for 32 years. And our main function is in assisting you is going to be addressing security, and that includes crowd control, parking, ingress and egress, traffic flow, and we work very closely with the Department of Public Works. But my staff that's going to be working even closer with you is going to be Commander Garcia. So I'll go ahead and let Commander Garcia say hello.
Hello, IDEA Committee. My name is Commander Mario Garcia. I will be the liaison to the police department, and I will probably be seeing you in future meetings to anything you need, as like the chief said. So Mario Garcia.
Randy?
Hi, good evening. Randy Burrow. I'm the Director of Public Works, the City Engineer, the Director of Emergency Services, and the Director of Marina. I've been in this job for 21 years now, so I've got a little bit of background on the city. Public Works covers a whole gamut of things. We cover maintenance of everything that goes on in the city: water, sewer, storm drain, streets, buildings and grounds, parks maintenance. Excuse me. And we also control and issue the permits for activities in the public right away. So as the IDEA committee comes along, if there's events and activities you want to do, the permits would be processed through my office. But of course, there's a couple of areas I cover, as you've heard. So I've accrued a lot of things over the years. So if you have any questions or interest in those activities, I'd be happy to come and speak to you about those. Thank you.
Our city attorney?
Good evening, committee members. My name is Michael Roush. I'm currently not the city attorney for Brisbane, although I have served as city attorney for the city for a number of years. But I now provide legal services, legal counsel to the city, do most of the day-to-day legal work for the city. And so I'm going to do a little presentation for you all here in a few minutes or so. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that any of you have as you go along about any legal issues that might come before the committee.
Stuart?
Hi, I'm Stuart Schillinger, the city's assistant city manager. Anything anybody else doesn't want to do in the city, I end up doing. So I will be supporting Ingrid and Caroline and whatever they need to make sure that the ideas of the IDEA committee get implemented.
So I wanted to just give you a little bit of a background on kind of how we got to this point and where the council adopted a resolution and support for a new committee. It really came out of an employee group that we gave a name to, and I remember it by its acronym. We call it EPIC, but it's Equity Plus Inclusion Committee. It was made up of employees of every department in the city, and they had a number of internal issues that they were dealing with, but also came up with the idea of having an external facing community group that they could kind of counter with and partner with going forward, so that a lot of the initiatives that they saw as important, could be also played out in the broader community. And the two of the key people in that were Ingrid Padilla, the city clerk, who's going to be your lead person, and Caroline Chung. And I'm going to have both of them kind of give you a little bit of a background on themselves, and so that you get to know them a little bit better. So I guess, Ingrid, maybe you can start. You're on mute.
It was a pleasure working with our committee members already. We've been introduced and through the interview process and the recruitment process. So thank you and nice to see you. Thank you again for coming to the meeting on time and early. It's great. So I've been the city clerk for the city of Brisbane for about 5 years, and I've worked for the city for the last 6 years. I'm raising my kids here in the city of Brisbane, and I'm really looking forward to what the committee can accomplish together for the future generations. My background is in multicultural education, in nonprofit management, and organization and leadership, as well as Asian American studies. So in my previous lives, worked in higher education and in the nonprofit sector, working for underserved communities. And you will probably see me around in the park, playing catch with the kids, things like that. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
Good evening, IDEA Committee. It's an honor and a pleasure to support Ingrid as your staff support for the committee. And I'm the communications manager, as Clay mentioned. I've been in this role for a number of years, but worked with the city for about 15. So I don't live in town, but I know more about Brisbane probably than where I do live. So it's again an honor to be able to work with you and look forward to the things that we'll be tackling together. Clay mentioned also I'm working with Ingrid on the EPIC committee, and in my responsibilities as a communications manager, I'm managing the STAR, the newsletter that goes out every month, the weekly city news, or the city manager's weekly update, also known as the Blast, which hopefully you guys are all subscribed to, our social media platforms, which I know committee member Locke did a nice post when we congratulated the new city commissioners and committee members. So expressing his excitement for the committee, so that was nice to see. And again, also the signboards, yeah. So I'll be helping to get the word out, of course, of the different efforts, initiatives that we work on.
Okay, is there any questions or anybody would like to input at this point? If not, I think we're ready to go on to the next item, which is the reviewing the committee bylaws. I think Ingrid, you're going to take the lead on that.
Yes, let me go ahead and share my screen. Thank you to all the staff members that came. And if you need to leave, we understand. Go ahead and share my screen here. So I'll go ahead and speak a little bit about the current bylaws that were adopted by the City Council. A little bit of background before that is like on September 23rd, this is when the City Council approved creating a citizen committee for the purpose of defining the meaning of diversity and inclusion for the City of Brisbane. And that the committee would also be an ambassador for the city to various aspects of the community and would provide feedback to the City Council on issues related to diversity and inclusion. Fast forward February 3rd, 2020. This is really fast forwarding. That should say February 2022, the resolution was passed formally establishing the citywide Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accountability Committee, which contains the bylaws or rules of procedure for the committee. For tomorrow's City Council meeting, they will also be considering a resolution to kind of discuss further the IDEA committee with your new appointments, your your terms of office, because the majority of you all were appointed for 2 years. So that's going to be kind of restated at tomorrow's council meeting, if approved. So the city committees, as you know, are advisory bodies that formulate recommendations to the council. The primary responsibility of the IDEA committee will be to make recommendations to the city council on community-focused programs, events, and policies. That responsibility will include preparing community-based and focused policy, event, and program recommendations, and an annual work plan for the city council. In order for the IDEA committee to work, its members should receive appropriate education and tasks, and we're hoping to do those throughout the year. And they could meet as often as required, keep track of ideas not directly on agenda items for future reference, and recognize that inclusion, diversity, and equity issues are necessarily complex, sensitive, and holistic. It will also we're also hoping that by the next meeting, the committee can pick a chair who will provide leadership consistent with these principles. So in terms of the section 1 of the bylaws, the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accountability Committee will consist of 5 to 7 public members appointed by the City Council. The committee members will serve without compensation and will serve in an advisory capacity to the council. Members of the committee must at all times during their service be residents of the city or work within the city. So we're hoping by sometime later this year to open up the recruitment, because we will need a committee with at least 5 to 7 members. And we're hoping that we will also be able to recruit somebody who actually also works within the city to provide that perspective. So as for the initial appointments, there would be, to stagger them, there are going to be 1-year terms and 2-year terms. So all 4 of you were appointed for the 2-year terms. And within 30 days of the expiration of a member's term of office, a member may request the City Council to reappoint the member to the committee. The City Council may reappoint the member to the committee without re-interviewing the member. So in terms of the terms of office, after the initial 1-year and 2-year appointments, committee members shall serve staggered 2-year terms. Also, if a committee member no longer lives or works in the city or resigns, the member's seat on the committee shall be deemed to be vacant and the individual shall no longer serve on the committee. And any committee may be removed with or without cause by a vote of the majority of the City Council. Officers. The committee shall elect from its members a chair and a vice chair. Members are encouraged to rotate chair and vice chair annually. In terms of meetings, section 5, the committee shall meet monthly unless otherwise approved by the committee, and the committee may from time to time also hold joint meetings as needed with the City Council and other commissions and committees. So later this evening, we will be discussing when our regular meeting will be as a committee. And in addition, subcommittees may be formed as needed within our committee in relation to the work of the IDEA committee and as prescribed by the Brown Act, which legal counsel Rosh will discuss later today. Section 6 is about quorum. A quorum is necessary for a committee meeting to be held. A majority of the authorized members of the committee shall constitute a quorum. So for example, with our 5-member committee, we'll need 3 members to constitute a quorum. If when 7 members have been appointed, then 4 members will constitute a quorum. And the resolution also provided that the effective date is immediately upon its passage and adoption. Any questions regarding the bylaws? And the next section can also expand a lot of the roles and responsibilities of the committee. So I'll stop sharing now. Okay, so the next I see no members of the public also wishing to make any comment regarding these items. And so next we have legal counsel Roush reviewing the Ralph M. Brown Act. And I believe Caroline will be sharing the slide deck.
Slides up on my phone. So you guys see the role of the IDEA Committee on Brown Act training? Okay. Let me just make this full screen.
Well, again, good evening, committee members. Glad to have you on board as this new committee starts out. Like I said, my name is Michael Roush. I'm the legal counsel to the city of Brisbane. And I want to go over just what the role of the committee is. I think Ingrid has set forth that pretty clearly, so I'll be somewhat redundant about that, but that's okay, so that everyone sort of knows what their roles are with respect to this new committee. Also, I'll be talking about a state act called the Ralph M. Brown Act and some training for you to do that. This may be, for some of you at least, a new experience serving on a committee that's appointed by the city council. And when a group of residents or people who work in the city serve on a committee that's appointed by the city council, there are certain requirements that apply. And you will be it'll be necessary for you to honor those regulations and make sure that you follow those regulations concerning when you meet and how you meet, because it's very important. The idea is that these committees that are appointed by the council, committees and commissions, the idea is that the public needs to be involved in that process and needs to know when you're going to meet and needs to know what you're going to discuss when you do meet. So therefore, it's very important that that when an item comes, when you're going to have an item before you, that you know about it, the public knows about it, and everyone in the community has an opportunity to weigh in on the issue. And obviously, if this group were meeting without having that kind of public notice, without knowing what your agenda is, the public would not have a right to, or not have the ability to participate in the meeting. And that runs contrary to the whole idea of not only of lack of transparency, but also would be contrary to having issues that are inclusive and that are equitable and accountable. So we're hoping that these issues sort of dovetail with one another and it makes some sense. Okay, next slide, please. The role of the committee. As Ingrid has laid out, your jurisdiction was set by the resolution that she just walked through with you. The committee has the authority to promulgate rules to govern its own meetings consistent with city policies and procedures. One of the things, for example, will be later on tonight, you will be setting when you're going to meet and how often, and what date it'll be and what time. Those are the kinds of rules that you can adopt to govern your own meetings. We'll talk a little bit more about those rules as we go down goes through the list. You will have an agenda, and we're going to talk a little bit more about why we have an agenda and why agendas are important. But generally, the agenda will be set by city staff in consultation with the chair. As Ingrid indicated, you are appointed by the city council and therefore you're subject to oversight by the city council. And of course, your primary role is to provide advice and recommendations to the city council concerning the matters upon which you have been appointed, mainly having to do with inclusion, diversity, etc. Next slide, please. Be somewhat repetitive on the membership of the committee. There'll be 5 to 7 members. There's 4 of you now. Hopefully we will get some additional folks to come on board later on this year. That you have to either be a city resident or work in the city. The members are appointed by the city council and can be removed by the city council. Next slide, please. The duties of the committee, council will be looking for coming up with some sort of definition of what inclusion, diversity, equity, and accountability, what it means for the city. You'll be an ambassador for the city to the community, and you will provide insight and input, recommendations to the city council on issues that come before this committee. Next slide, please. Now we're going to shift gears and talk about the Ralph M. Brown Act. It's a state law that was enacted back in 1953. And it's basically stayed unchanged in 70 years. And again, as I mentioned before, it's the intent of this law that city councils and their appointed advisory bodies, such as the Planning Commission, this committee, and in the Park and Recreation Committee, and every other commission that the city council appoints, that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. And again, the reason for that is that the city council and their commissions and committees, they serve the people of this community. And people in this community cannot decide what is best for them unless they know what it is that the people that they have appointed or they've elected, and the people that they've elected who they've appointed, that they know what they're doing. So for the public to be informed is the purpose of the Brown Act. Next slide, please. The Brown Act was also embodied in a state constitution that was approved in 2004. And again, it's just the whole idea of emphasizing the right of public to access meetings and to access writings of government officials. And the idea is that if there's any doubt about it, we should always want to have more access to government, not less. Next slide. The Brown Act and the right of access to meetings and the right of access to writings apply to every local government body, city council, and all the different bodies, the committees and the commissions that the city council appoints. Next slide, please. Public meetings. All your meetings must be conducted publicly. And that means that those will be noticed and they'll be open to the community, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting. There's some exceptions. For example, when city council meets in closed session for things like real property negotiations or litigation, those meetings are not open, but that's the exception, not the rule. Almost every other meeting that the council and their committees and the commissions conduct will be open and available to the public. Next slide, please. So what constitutes a meeting? A meeting is defined in the Brown Act as any congregation of majority of the committee at the same time and place to hear, discuss, or deliberate about an item that could come before the committee. Now, what can happen, there can be meetings that are not lawful, and that happens sometimes if there is a series of gatherings, each of which involves less than a quorum, but it results in a majority of the committee having heard, discussed, or deliberated. And we'll talk about this a little more detail going forward, but that's one of the things that you have to avoid, because even though those types of gatherings would be considered a meeting, it is not a lawful kind of meeting. And also, there can also be an unlawful meeting if there is a collective concurrence or an understanding of a matter by a majority of the committee through the use of electronic communications, email, text, social media. I mean, the reality of it is we all use social media these days to communicate with one another. And so you as a committee member must be very cognizant of the fact that you cannot email, text, use social media in communication with other members of your committee such that a majority of you reach sort of a collective decision before actually hearing, discussing, or deliberating the item at your regularly scheduled noticed agendized meeting. Next slide, please. As indicated, the whole intent of the Brown Act is to make sure that the public has a right to participate in meetings. And the public includes not just, local folks, but media, people who have an interest in the item, lobbyists, anyone. It's very broad that, anyone can participate in the meeting. And that means just not attending, but they can also record it. They can be heard. And in order for that participation to be meaningful, there needs to be an agenda. And the agenda has to be posted in advance of the meeting so that the public can know what you're going to talk about. It also means that only those items on your agenda can be discussed, deliberated, and taken action on it. In other words, if you start talking about something that's not on the agenda, then that would prohibit someone who might have an interest in that item from knowing you were even going to discuss it. It also means that the materials relative to the item have to be available prior to the meeting so that not only you as committee members, but that the public also knows what it is that you're looking at, what you're considering, so that they can make meaningful comments to you before you make your decision. You can, however, adopt reasoned regulations to conduct your meeting. So for example, if you had an item that you knew was going to be very controversial and you had, say, 30 speakers that wanted to be heard on the matter, there's nothing wrong with your saying, all right, we're going to limit individual testimony to 2 or 3 minutes. Otherwise, if you let people filibuster, as it were, you could be there till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and that doesn't serve the public interest nor your sleep habits. So you can certainly do that. You can also limit repetitive testimony. Hopefully we won't have that come up, but it is something within your control. Next slide, please. The exceptions to the meetings of the Brown Act. The Brown Act does not prohibit individual contacts between you as a public official, and you are considered a public official, and members of the public. So in other words, if part of your duties as a committee member would be to talk to people in the community about an issue that is in front of you, you can certainly have individual contacts without running afoul of the Brown Act. What you have to be careful about, though, are contacts between you and other members of the committee. Right now, for example, because there's only 4 of you, if what would happen is that a majority of you, there would be 3. So you could say member A could contact member B, but member A then could not contact member C about the same item. Because if you were to do that, then you would end up having a majority of the committee talking about the same matter. The same kind of situation exists about situations where you might communicate with residents, staff, consultants, etc. And again, we will talk a little bit more about that in terms of how to avoid serial meetings. Next slide, please. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't all be in the same room in certain situations. So for example, if there was a conference, say the League of California City had a conference, and those kinds of meetings or those kinds of conferences are open to the public, a majority of you could certainly attend that without running afoul of the Brown Act. Similarly, a majority could attend a city function where you would be, the majority of you would all be at the same time in the same place. The caveat is that a majority of you cannot discuss among yourselves at that conference or at that place a matter that's within your subject matter jurisdiction. So if you're at a conference, for example, and you say you don't know anybody else other than the committee members who are there with you, you can certainly, talk with each other. It's not like you have the plague or anything. You just can't discuss anything that would otherwise come before your committee. Next slide, please. Similarly, there could be a community meeting. A community meeting that would be open and publicized so that anybody in the community could attend that. In that particular case, a majority of the committee members could attend that meeting. Again, with the caveat being that you cannot discuss among yourselves, and the majority cannot discuss among themselves something that would come before the committee. Next slide, please. Again, let's say a majority or all of you were invited to a wedding or a sports event, etc., like that. You may attend, the majority may attend a purely social or ceremonial occasion without running afoul of the Brown Act, again, with the same caveat. While you're there, don't talk about matters that would come before the committee. Next slide. Majority can also attend and participate in an open and publicized meeting of another legislative body. So for example, maybe after you have come up with a recommendation that's going to go to the city council, and so the majority of you or all of you want to attend the city council meeting to make sure that your recommendation is heard by the council. Again, that doesn't prohibit you from attending that meeting of the city council, as long as you're not discussing among yourselves while you're waiting to be heard before the council, a matter that comes before the committee. Next slide, please. From time to time, your committee may appoint what are called subcommittees. Subcommittees are matters, let's say when you get 5 or 7 members, let's say that you want to create a committee of 2 to go out and look at a particular item. That subcommittee would be, and let's say that committee that is created is what's called a standing committee. And so let's say that standing committee is having a meeting. Another member who is not a part of that standing committee could attend to hear what's being said, but that person, that third committee member, would not be able to speak or participate at that meeting, but they could be there to observe and hear. Next slide, please. Here's some practical guidance concerning what we've been talking about in terms of social media. As I indicated before, you certainly can have individual contacts with members of the community. Let's face it, that's often going to occur through a social media platform. Someone's going to send you an email or a text about a matter that's going to come before this committee. Nothing wrong with that. The Brown Act permits members of the committee to communicate in that way. What you have to be careful about is using that social media platform to discuss among the majority of the members business related to the committee. And so if you were to get an email, let's say you got an email from another committee member and all the other committee members were copied on that we certainly give you advice not to do that, because what that involves is that it allows the majority of the committee members to have the opinion and the views of another committee member, and that would have the possibility of having reached a decision about something outside of your regular meeting. So the majority cannot use the social media platform to discuss among yourselves business related to the committee. Next slide, please. Certainly, we are currently obviously having meetings by teleconference, and the Brown Act was recently amended to permit the use of technology to hold meetings. We're holding these meetings remotely, obviously, and that is certainly permitted. And even, hopefully when this pandemic resolves itself, where again, we're meeting in person, if for some reason you're having a committee meeting and you're out of town, but you want to participate, that can happen. There's certain procedural things that Ingrid can inform you about, but if you want to attend the meeting, but you're going to be out of town, that can still happen by teleconference, even after we're not meeting remotely for every meeting like we're doing now. Next slide, please. This is what I was mentioning in teleconferencing in non-emergency situations. The agenda has to indicate that you're going to be out of town, that there has to be an agenda posted where you're going to be. You have to have an ability for the public to participate. It's kind of clunky and doesn't really work practically, but again, we have to go through these steps in order to allow a member to participate by teleconference. Next slide, please. Like we're doing now, we're holding remote meetings during a declared state of emergency. Not sure how long that's going to go on, but it's going to go on at least for a few more weeks, or maybe more months. We don't know. The notice to members of the public that Ingrid read at the start of this meeting, it tells people how they can attend the meeting remotely. Again, has to have a roll call vote, but other than that, all the other provisions of the Brown Act do apply. Next slide, please. I think we talked about this a little bit about community meetings. And again, it's a majority of you can attend a community meeting when there's a city matter that's on the agenda. And as long as it's noticed and it's an open meeting, then certainly you can attend that kind of meeting. Next slide, please. Talk about serial meetings, and there's two forms of this. One is called a daisy chain and one is called hub and spoke. Both of these are the meetings that are unlawful and should be avoided. The improper daisy chain meetings occur when a majority of the members communicate through a separate interaction. For example, member A contacts member B, and then member B contacts member C, and the three of you come to a collective understanding about how a matter will be addressed when it comes before the committee. That kind of collective concurrence or understanding that is not taking place outside of your noticed meeting is an improper serial meeting. Similarly, you can have what's called an improper hub and spoke meeting, where you would have a common point of contact, the hub, and that hub communicates with the majority of the members, the spokes, and reveals what other members are thinking, such that a majority concurrence is developed before the committee takes up the matter at its regular meeting. Next slide, please. Example, member A calls and says that she needs, or a member of the public calls member A and says that she needs A's vote on an issue that's pending before the committee. Member A asks, "Are you sure you need my vote?" The member of the public replies yes, because members B and C will vote for the issue, but not members D and E. If member A commits her vote, either for or against the issue, then there's been a Brown Act violation because there's been a collective concurrence by a majority of the committee before the item is heard at a public meeting. Similarly, let's say there's a complex issue coming before the committee, and your staff member has individual meetings with you to go over some technical details. During that meeting, it becomes clear to the staff member what the staff member thinks the majority vote will be. If the staff member were to disclose this information, even inadvertently, to one or more committee members, that again would be a Brown Act violation, because the members will then go into the meeting believing the decision has been made before the item has been heard. Now, that doesn't mean that, that staff is not going to discuss with individual members about an item that's going to be on the agenda. That happens regularly. It's just the way the staff knows what's going on, and the way the committee members know what's going to happen on the agenda in terms of the item. But the staff member certainly cannot disclose to the other members what other committee members are thinking. Next slide, please. These kind of things can happen sometimes. We have these scenarios where the city has a chat room where people can call in and discuss anything that's city business. And I think what you have to be concerned about is that committee members not use that chat room so that you get to know what other committee members are thinking about a particular item, because to do that could result in a collective understanding occurring outside of the regular meeting. Okay, next slide, please. Agendas. As I mentioned before, every meeting of the legislative body must have a posted agenda, because that posted agenda tells the public about what's going to happen at the meeting. The agendas have to be posted at least 72 hours before a regular meeting and at least 24 hours before a special meeting. The agenda must contain a meaningful description of each item so that the members of the public know what it is you're going to talk about. And agendas must specify that for each item of business is the item for an action item or for discussion only. Next slide, please. The agendas will tell you or tell the members of the public where the meeting is going to be held, where it's going to be held, and that information is going to be available at City Hall, the city's website, city's library, and then the city's cable channel. And what has to be available is not only the agenda, but the agenda packet, the backup materials. And so those are available to the public as well, so that the public knows what it is that you all have looked at and will have an opportunity to review the materials and then be able to ask questions or comment on those materials. Next slide, please. From time to time, you may need to have a special meeting. That probably won't occur too often with this committee, but if an item comes up that, and it happens situation where you need to take action on an item, but you don't have 72 hours to give notice, you can have a special meeting with 24 hours notice. Again, it's not likely this committee will have that, but if it does, at least 24 hours notice is typically required. Next slide, please. Regular special meeting can be adjourned to a particular time and place. This often will happen. Let's say you had an item that your meeting started at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. It's fairly controversial, lots of speakers. You get to 10:30, 11:30, and there's still people that want to be heard. And I can tell you from experience, the later in the evening it goes, usually the decisions don't become as good at 11:30 as they do at 9:30. And so you may want to adjourn the meeting to another date, another week from now, and have the people come back at that time to be heard. Next slide, please. They will be on your agenda, a place on the agenda for members of the public to have an opportunity to address you on any matter that they feel is relevant to your committee. So the general rule is that if the item is not on your agenda, you cannot take any action or have any discussion about the item that's not on the agenda. There are certain exceptions, but those exceptions are really more particular to council rather than to you. So let's jump to the next slide. I mentioned before that there are closed session items. Typically, again, probably this committee won't be dealing with that. These are more city council matters, litigation, real estate negotiations, personnel, labor negotiations. Those kinds of things do not have to be conducted in public. They can be conducted by the council in what's called closed session. Obviously, the idea is that you want to be able to have a frank and open discussion between the council, city manager, city attorney about these kind of items, and you don't want to do that in a public setting. Next slide. As I mentioned, each agenda will have an opportunity for members of the public to speak on any agenda item and also any matter that the public wants to talk about. We have, it happens twice at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting. While the public may talk about these matters or bring them up, the committee may not act on or discuss the item on the agenda. Typically what happens is if that the committee has an interest in it, it would either refer the matter to staff for a response or ask that it be put on a future agenda. But the committee should not discuss or take any action on an item that is not on the agenda. Next slide. Enforcement, when there is a violation of the Brown Act, there can be penalties, there can be civil enforcement actions, there can be criminal prosecutions. It doesn't happen very often. But the real problem with the violations of the Brown Act, that it erodes the public's trust in the whole governmental process. So that is why we certainly encourage you to follow these regulations about the Brown Act and not find yourself where someone's saying that, oh, this committee or this committee member violated the Brown Act. We don't want that because it erodes the public's trust. I think that is it. So that ends the presentations. A lot of material to sort of get your head around, but I'll be glad to answer any questions that come to mind now, or if you have any questions later, you can certainly get a hold of me, and I'll be glad to answer the questions.
Anyone have any questions for me? Stop sharing.
Don't be shy. Come on now.
Can we get a version of the deck just for ourselves to review?
Say it again, please.
Can Ingrid, can you maybe share the deck that he
Oh.
shared just so that we have it on for ourselves?
Yes, certainly, because like I said, it's a lot of material to sort of put your head around right away, but please take a look at the slides. And again, if you have any questions as you go forward, either let Ingrid know about them or let me know about them, and we will be glad to answer those questions.
The other item that I
So-
wanted to add was that for the committee members, we are going to be working on creating your own city email so that at least all the records will be kept in one area, like the city, city emails. And then when I send out those emails, typically because of the Brown Act, we don't want to violate any Brown Act Brown Act violations. People don't tend to reply all to my emails. They just reply directly to me and communicate with me directly instead of the whole group.
So this is Mangesh. Thank you, Mr. Roche, for the very exhaustive review of the Brown Act. That was very helpful. One question I had, considering that our committee right now is 4 members and is expected to remain so at least for several months, the quorum definition in the slides that you showed and that were discussed earlier referred to committees ranging from 5 and above, for which the quorum would have been 3 or 4 and so on. So in our case, what will be the exception that we will need to live with for the foreseeable future until we increase our committee size to 5 members?
Well, right now, because you have 4 members, 3 members would consider a quorum. So again, under the Brown Act, you could have a communication with one other committee member, and that committee member could have a communication with you. You just wouldn't want either of those 2 committee members then to contact, a third or any additional committee members, because you could run afoul of reaching some sort of collective decision outside of your meeting. But in order for the committee to meet, you will need at least 3 members, even though there's 4 of you. And if you get to 5, then you're going to still need 3. And then if you get to 6 or 7, you would need 4 to have a quorum.
Got it. Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. So yeah, for us, the quorum definition will be 3 members. Yeah.
Yes.
We'll make a note of that. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, we can go ahead and move on. Just wanted to note that I have not received any emails or text messages from the public There's no members of the public attending the meeting currently, but we will go ahead and move on to setting the regular idea committee meeting schedule. So I hope folks do have access to your calendars and your plans.
Ingrid, before that, I was looking at the agendas,
Mhm.
and I don't think we actually did the committee member introductions. Can we do that? That way we can get to know each other.
Yes, please, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll start. So I'm actually a fairly new resident of Brisbane. I've only been here about 2 months. But other than that, I've been in California since 2014, and before that, born and raised in New York City. And I don't work in Brisbane. Yeah, I actually work for a place in my firm in LA. I'm a real estate financing attorney. But yeah, that's a little about me. But I'm looking forward to getting to know each and every one of you in more detail over the next 2 years.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Committee Member Locke. We'll go ahead with who wants to go next.
I guess I can popcorn.
Yeah, popcorn.
Diane, since you're next on my screen.
All right. I live in Brisbane about 10 years. And then, but as you can see, I grew up in a different culture. But I have experience working both helping the diverse groups and also working as part of the government employees. And then, I'm just hoping to help the community understand the diversity. And then, I also hope that, increasing the confidence in living and working with and then for, other diverse groups in Brisbane. And then, here, I don't, I live in Brisbane, but I didn't really get to know a lot of people. So this is a good opportunity for me to know other members of the diverse groups and then other communities and a member of the city of Brisbane.
Okay, who do you want to popcorn to?
Okay, Alex is under my picture on my monitor. So
Here you go. And yeah, I for some reason can't figure out how to rename myself in this particular Zoom, but please, I'm Alex. And similarly to William, I'm a relatively new Brisbaneite. We moved in August, and prior to that, I've spent about 11 years in San Francisco, but then also originally hail from New York. So a little East Coast representation, I guess. I work in South San Francisco at Genentech. I work at the Genentech Foundation, and I've been there for about 6 years. The mission of the foundation is around challenging and dismantling systemic barriers to career pathways in science and medicine. And so through my work, I've had the opportunity to think a bit about diversity and inclusion in the workforce, and it's something that is really important to me. And now that my husband and 20-month-old daughter and I live in Brisbane, I'm excited to be able to bring that passion and interest to the place that I live and to my community, and to really work with you all. I'm really excited it's my first foray into city government. So I'm also eager and anxious about that component, but looking forward to working in this new committee with all of you together. And I'll hand it over to Mangesh.
Thanks, Alex. So like William and Alex, I'm also relatively new to Brisbane. My family and I have been living here for the past almost 7 months now. But unlike them, I'm not a New Yorker. I spent a long time in California. Prior to that, I was born and brought up in India. And Brisbane is a wonderful city. even being part of this committee, that was evidenced by the tremendous show of support from the city staff and the various committees, the city and the council patiently taking the time to explain the Brown Act so that our new committee, right from the get-go does everything right. This is an exceptionally well-run city, I wanted to do my part to see how we can, contribute and how we can make this an even better place. There is a sea change taking place here. The city is growing more diverse, and it is very timely that this committee has been formed. Our committee, has a great mandate to come up with the right ideas to, promote inclusion, diversity, and also equity, and also make sure that all of those items are accountable and make the best possible recommendations to the City Council. So I'm excited to be part of this great group and look forward to working with all of you. And thank you, City staff, for appointing us to the committee, and we look forward to working with you as well.
Thank you all so much. Very, very excited. So now let's see how often or when we're actually going to be able to connect and set our regular committee meetings. Perhaps I was thinking maybe we could just start by Wednesdays since we're here. How do people feel about Wednesday evenings?
So I can't do the second and fourth Wednesday of every month. I'm part of an investment group. That's when we meet. I can do the third or the first Wednesday.
I believe Park and Rec does the second Wednesday and OSEC has the fourth. So the third will work.
Works for me.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Yes, works for me too.
So Ingrid, are we going to stick with the same time slot, 6:30 p.m. start time?
Up to the group. Does that work for all of you?
We can do it 6 to 7 and try to keep it to an hour to the extent possible. That'd be great. I'd prefer that. However, the other committee members prefer 6:30 p.m. That's okay.
No, I second 6 o'clock. I think earlier is better.
Yep.
Yes.
Fine
That
with
works.
me.
Yes.
Okay. 6 p.m. Third Wednesdays. Caroline Stewart, are we okay with that time frame?
Yeah, Park and Rec has had their meeting tonight for rescheduling for a conference that happened last week, so that will work.
Sounds great. All right, so we have our regular idea committee meeting scheduled for the third Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. Depending on like the agenda items, it may take longer than an hour, but we'll try to be as concise yet productive with our meetings. Next would be staff reports. Just a quick announcement about the next idea committee meeting that we will be selecting a chair and a co-chair, a chair and a vice chair. So just be mindful for the next meeting that we'll discuss that next month. Any committee member reports or announcements that people want to share? Nope, I see nothing. I will go ahead and do adjournment. So our next meeting is going to be, let's see, April 20th, 6 o'clock. So we will be adjourning our meeting now at 7:34 p.m. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
It was nice meeting all of you.
Hey, thank you.
Everyone. Night.
Night.